listening to the Betmaker Show. This is the College Bowl preview for Thursday, January 9th, 2020. And now, live from Las Vegas, the host of the Betmaker Show, Brian Blessing.
So it's all come down to this, the college football championship. Clemson, LSU, a Tiger will win, and we've got a lot of information to dissect diving into this game. Brian Blessing and Bruce Marshall from the legendary publication, The Gold Sheet. We're hanging out in Las Vegas, but all eyes are going to be on Clemson and LSU on a Monday night, and the consensus, LSU is 6, the total 69.5 or 70, and Bruce, at first blush, I would just, and I've talked to numerous sportsbook directors in the last 10 days on my radio show here in Las Vegas, Sportsbook Radio, and to a man, they all seem to agree, but it is what it is. It's a market number now, but I haven't heard anybody say they don't think that this number is a little too juicy.
Yeah, and it just seems to keep going up, although slowly. And there's a lot of volume in a championship game like that. But I mean, this one keeps going up a little bit higher. I can remember at the end of last week, mostly 5.5s, and then over at the South Point, they thought they were going to test 6, and they did for about 20 minutes, and they pulled it back. But now almost everybody's got it 6, and there's a couple places around town that have put this thing up at 6.5. So it seems to be some LSU buy pressure. I don't think it gets any beyond this, but I cannot see it getting to 7. But who knows? We'll see what happens.
Well, Burrow gets the hype, right? And obviously, the last thing everybody saw, they torched Oklahoma. The crazy thing is, I don't know that necessarily surprised anybody that we've seen Oklahoma or Big 12 teams kind of do this stuff. Last year was Notre Dame, jumped into the Final Four, and they were nowhere near good enough, and that ended up being the case with the Big 12 representative this year. But part of it is this SEC perception that no matter who they throw in there, it's the best conference. I think that's the biggest thing. Burrow gets some hype, but mostly it's maybe that SEC, I don't know if it's a bias, but it's a perception for sure.
Yeah, I think it is a perception, and the ACC gets short shrift. I mean, a lot of people forget. Last year, ACC teams won the national football title and the national basketball title, but still seems to get kind of overlooked by us at Gold Sheet. We think that the public has reacted to the wrong result in the semifinal round, that the team that showed more actually was Clemson, which had to pull itself out of the abyss against Ohio State and gradually take control of that game. It looked like they were going to lose and really staring down the barrel in that game. It was just one big party for LSU and touchdown after touchdown, and Oklahoma did nothing to slow that thing down. But Clemson's the side that really showed something, I thought, in that semifinal round, and to slow down Ohio State and end up coming back and gaining control of that game and winning was a real credit to Clemson, yet doesn't seem to be getting that sort of respect from the betting audience. So my gut feel is that the public has been going the wrong way on this one. We'll see.
Well, let's play to our strengths, Bruce. We always joke that we're old and we've been around the block, and the old football axiom is defense wins championships. And the bottom line is, to me, Clemson has the better defense. LSU allows 339 yards a game. Clemson allows 264 yards a game, and specifically, Clemson allows 151 yards passing a game. LSU allows 221 yards passing a game. And at the end of the day, sure, Clemson came back, but it was the defense that saved their bacon, down 16-0. They literally shut things down against Ohio State. And to me, I think it's correlated. If Clemson wins this game, it's because of their defense.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, if you look at what Brent Venables has done in the past with this defense and some of the pieces he has on that defense, he can present LSU with some challenges that the Baton Rouge Tigers haven't seen probably since midseason, the Auburn game. And I think the Auburn game is an interesting one to refer to here. Kevin Steele, Auburn's defensive coordinator, tried something radical in that game at midseason in Baton Rouge. He ended up deploying his defense in a lot of 3-1-7 looks, really heavy on defensive backs there. In Steele's case, he thought he had the defensive front that might be able to slow LSU down, just with 3 down linemen and 1 linebacker, and slow the running game down, which is a little underrated for LSU, and just take his chances flooding his defensive backfield with the defensive backs. And it worked to a certain extent. It was only 23-20 LSU that night. And what Venables has are some interesting pieces, including Isaiah Simmons, the Butkus Award-winning linebacker, although, linebacker for him, that's only part of the game. He floats back into a safety role sometime. He reminds me a lot of David Fulcher, that defensive back, a terror for Arizona State, big hitting free safety, played for the Bengals for many years and did all-pro. I think Simmons is a little bit better, sort of a hybrid there. In the Clemson defense, Kayvon Wallace, big-time safety. He's probably going to be a first-round pick, too. They made 2 interceptions on Fields last week, or 2 weeks ago, and Ohio State did pass for 320 in that game, but no gain longer than 24 yards. So they did kind of keep everything in front, and slowing down Ohio State was scoring every bit as much as LSU this year, and Ohio State only landed on 23 in that game. So you're right, the defense is good enough for Clemson, though I think it's going to be their offense able to milk the clock a little bit and sustain some drives, which Oklahoma couldn't when that game was being decided last week. That will also be a big difference from the semifinal round.
For outstanding information and special offerings and promotions, we invite you and encourage you to sign up for our newsletter today simply by going to the website at bettmaker.com. I think you can make the case LSU's played the tougher schedule, but to the point you just made, Ohio State scored 23 points. That's the most that Clemson allowed this year. And LSU has had their games where they got involved in track meets, allowed 37 to Mississippi, 41 in the Bama game, where that one you can say they had the big lead and took their foot off the pedal a little bit. But Vandy, put 38 up on them. Texas put 38 up on them. It might be just too simplistic a thing, but this could very well be a correlated deal. If it's LSU, they dictate pace, and it's a track meet, and it's an up-and-down game. And if it's Clemson that ultimately wins the battle, they've shut this thing down within reason with a high total of 69.5, that it may be Clemson in the under.
Yeah, that's sort of how we were thinking. And the LSU thing, yeah, some of those games just got stupid this year, and it was just back and forth, and it became a track meet. And in LSU's defense, I think, because the opponents had so many more possessions and were forced into rally mode so early in that game, it became kind of an urgent situation to score. LSU's first quarter defensive numbers are very good. It's in the second half when some of these games got sloppy, like the Vanderbilt game and the Ole Miss game and some of the others. I've always said this year, if LSU's defense was on Northwestern, it'd be a top 5 defense in the country, but it's not. And they've got to deal with now a very capable Clemson side. And by the way, the schedule thing with Clemson, all Clemson people have to say is, look, we beat Ohio State, and that should quiet that enough, because if you're good enough to beat Ohio State, they can certainly play with well, in
the truth of the matter, Bruce, let's cut to the chase. People, again, the number is, I find, very intriguing because LSU looked so good against Oklahoma, but the belief by many until the 11th hour was Ohio State was the best team in college football all year long.
Yeah, and I think, that Clemson did that again. At some point, we just and to take nothing away from Coach O at LSU and what he's done there, and Burrow's numbers are off the charts, as we know, and I've never seen anything like this, a guy who's already thrown 55 TD passes, and he's not done yet, is completing 78%. I mean, that's unbelievable stuff. But Clemson has been beaten every brand name, including in bowl games since 2012, including the first one, which was against LSU back when Les Miles was there in the Peach Bowl that year. But LSU once, Notre Dame once, Alabama twice, Oklahoma twice, Ohio State 3 times. Dabo's 10-1 against the number in bowl games his last 11. And he's won 2 of the last 3 national titles. I mean, his record here, sometimes maybe it's just a default recommendation on Dabo is all we have to do. He's done fantastic work there. And Clemson, again, just gets a little bit underrated. We saw this last year. Remember, people were saying the same sorts of things about Alabama last year as they were about LSU this season. And we recall what happened in that game in Santa Clara.
Well, of course, when you get a standalone game of this magnitude, you're going to get props, and there are numbers for Burrow over under 27.5 completions, longest completion over under 52.5, and as you alluded to, Bruce, touchdown passes over under 3.5 with the under the slight favorite minus 3 nickels.
Yeah, I think in all these totals, and I'm seeing, sort of like a Super Bowl with some of these props here. I don't know that any one specific one has jumped out. I haven't seen the whole list yet. In general, what I do with these if you have some idea how the game will progress, and if you think it'll be a tighter game, then kind of use that to guide you in some of these props instead of just looking at the prop and not having an idea how the game might progress. If you think the game's going to move a bit slower than that Oklahoma game for LSU, and that Clemson's going to be able to impose its will here and slow this game down, then maybe you look under in some of these Burrow passing props. And I think the yardage prop was it 350 or something like that. And you start to look, under with some of those. But I think it's best to have some idea how you think the game is going to progress, and then base your props upon how you expect the action to flow.
Oh, well, I can say to you, Bruce, there have been numerous Super Bowls. I moved here in 2005. There have been a lot of them where I didn't have confidence or belief or faith in playing the side of the total, but had massive opinions, and my bigger bets were on the props because football's a funny-shaped object, and a backdoor cover or a goofy special teams play here and there. But in terms of the props, it's your handicap of the game that would lead you to a wide receiver or a running back. And, you have doubt about, playing the side or the total, but your handicap of the game and find that the real edge is in a prop number.
Yeah, I mean and if you're kind of playing the game out in your mind there, and you're figuring out how you think it's going to go, and then you see some props that end up fitting with what you think how the game is going to go, and that's generally a pretty good way to it. Adds some extra fun to it. The last big one we had in one of these games was the Super Bowl last year, which turned out to be a much lower scoring game than everybody thought. At the Patriots and the Rams, and who knows, it might be the case here. This is a pretty darn high total. And on first blush, you think, oh, these teams, they got enough offense to get over, but sometimes it doesn't work like that.
Well, no, I'm kind of leaning towards the under. I just think the points are just too valuable to pass up here, and I think it could be a wildly entertaining game, but it doesn't. They're not playing Oklahoma, right? I mean, let's just cut to the chase right there. Yeah. I mean, it's almost the starting point.
Yeah, it is. And I again refer back to that Ohio State game. Ohio State was just every bit, it did it a little bit differently than LSU, but every bit as potent, putting up all those Star Wars sorts of numbers. And Clemson slowed that game down. And most of it scored some points in recent championship games. The 44-16 last year. It was 35-31 when beating Alabama a couple of years ago. It did get wild 4 years ago when it was 45-40 down in Glendale when Watson was still there for Clemson. So on occasion it has gotten kind of wild. But this Clemson bunch and the way in the Ohio State semifinal game suggests this thing might be a little bit lower scoring, at least I think, on Monday night.
And sometimes we say the number might tell you something. I think the odds makers are trying to tell you something here. If you go back to the Clemson-Ohio State game, Travis Etienne, he had 10 carries for 36 yards. He's projected his number here is over under 93.5 yards rushing in this game. those numbers in the Ohio State game were clearly a function of that Ohio State had built a big lead, and Clemson was in kind of rally mode for 3/4 of the football game, where Lawrence threw the ball 33 times. If indeed Swinney's saying, listen, we're not letting Burrows kill us. One of the best ways to keep him from killing you is to keep him off the field, and that's to control the football and control the clock. And Etienne may very well end up being the focal point of any game plan Clemson's throwing out there, and I'd actually lean over 93 yards rushing for him.
Yeah, I'm like pro Etienne in most of his props because he ended up being a very important cog in that game. He scored 3 touchdowns for Clemson.
Right, but he had 3 catches for 98 yards. He's just a lightning bolt.
He was, and I mean, he's their big play. He turned the big play receiver. He can take a short pass and take it all the way. So yeah, I mean, I think they could lean on him a little bit more. And if it goes the way I think, and Clemson will try to slow the game down some, I think they've got the equipment to do that. And don't forget, Lawrence can run some too. And he turned that game around with his feet also last 2 weeks ago against Ohio State with that long touchdown run. So they can hurt you in various ways. And Etienne can certainly hurt you as a receiver as well as a runner.
What do you make of Lawrence? And we know Burrow's going to be the first pick of the draft. This young man, all he's done since he took the helm is never lose.
Yeah, that's not too bad. I guess he's 25-0 as a starter. Clemson's won 29 in a row. Lawrence didn't start till a few games into last year. Remember, right after he started, he got knocked out of that game with Syracuse, and they had to go, which was their third stringer, Bice, to come in there and win that game because Bryant had just transferred out. And then Lawrence is back in, and the rest is history. Yeah, I mean, I think it surprised some people how well he ran in that game against Ohio State. He can do a lot of different things. He's an awfully good athlete. So is Burrow, by the way, the other way. I think Burrow, if he wanted, probably could have been a college basketball player. He's that good of an athlete. But Lawrence really is, and his command of the game and ability to also to sell that last touchdown pass, because that came about because of his ability to run earlier, and Ohio State had to respect that. And there goes Etienne behind the linebackers, and you got a clear path to the end zone. So he can do a lot of different things, and they use him very effectively.
And let's wrap it up with this, and it's no small thing, the coaches. Swinney's got all the experience. Orgeron's a great story. Fiery guy, colorful guy. He's a great story. He's a guy you can root for. But, I mean, on paper, right? I mean, you've got to say, having been there and done that has to mean something, and you'd have to give, whether it's right or wrong remains to be seen, but on the way in, you'd have to give the edge to Swinney. Yeah,
especially what he's done in the postseason. You're taking nothing away from Coach O, whose biggest plus this year, I think, was just kind of getting out of the way of the offense. We've talked about this before. Last year in 2018, it was that Alabama game, the 29-0 home loss. That was sort of the come to Jesus moment for Coach O. And he said, I got to do something about this offense. And he went out and added Joe Brady from the Saints to change the offense in the offseason. And he worked with the existing coordinator, Steve Ensminger, and they changed this offense completely. But Dabo keeps winning. We've talked about his mark before in the postseason here. And it's interesting. There was at one point, Dabo for sure, where he early in his career there, they weren't too sure he was going to be the guy at Clemson, and in a little bit of trouble early in his career with the boosters there. It wasn't winning enough. And Coach O, until about maybe the end of last season when they won that bowl game against UCF, there were some doubts about him. But it's a good story both ways. But yeah, Dabo, I think because he's done it so much in the Bulls postseason, rates a little edge.
Buddy, I'm going to do it. I mean, I'm not just trying to be fashionable. I'm going to go with the better defense and the back class and the experience. And I'm going for Clemson outright. I'm going to say 31-27. I think the game, they have to dictate what's going on here defensively. I think if they're going to win, that's how they're going to win. A track meet certainly favors LSU. I'm going Clemson outright, 31-27. What say you?
34-31 Clemson, same thought, slightly under. That'd be a lot like the Alabama title game score from 3 years ago. But, yeah, I think there's a reason to think Clemson can win this thing outright. That means maybe look at the money line out there too if you want. But +6, yeah, we're in there with Clemson and slightly under as well.
The one thing we can say, Bruce, the two deserving teams did indeed make it.
Yes, and the Tigers are going to win the national championship.
Yes, they are.
It's just whichever one. Take your pick.
He's Bruce Marshall from the Gold Sheet. I'm Brian Blessing. We're in Las Vegas, but our eyes and our focus comes Monday night, and the college football championship should be a good one with Clemson and LSU putting a bow on the college football season. Well, that's the Betmaker Show for now. We publish multiple times each week. We'd like to thank you for listening, and if you liked what you heard, please take a moment to leave a rating and review, or subscribe to our show feed, or share our show with a friend or two and help us grow the show. We very much appreciate it. Visit us on the web at bettmaker.com, and reminder to sign up for the newsletter. Thanks to our engineer, Darren Vandermolen, and producer, Mike Gallivan. The Betmaker Show is a production of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated. Betmaker is a registered trademark. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or other use of this content without the express written consent of Cardinal Marketing Incorporated is strictly prohibited.
The handicapping and sports odds information contained on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Please confirm the wagering regulations in your jurisdiction, as they vary from state to state, province to province, and country to country. Using this information to contravene any law or statute is prohibited. The podcast is not associated with, nor is it endorsed by any professional or collegiate league, association, or team. This podcast does not target and is not intended for an audience under the age of 18. If you think that you have a gambling addiction, stop this podcast now and please seek help.
Gambling and betting on sports is a form of entertainment and should be about having a good time. But when done excessively, it may negatively affect other areas of a person's life, such as their physical and mental health, school or work performance, finances, and/or interpersonal relationships. At bettmaker.com and the Betmaker Show, we're concerned about the addiction that gambling may cause, and for this reason, we encourage everyone to practice responsible gambling. An approach to gambling that helps you ensure that it remains an enjoyable activity. Here are the main principles of responsible gambling. Don't think of gambling as a way to make money. Always gamble with money that you can afford to lose. Set limits and stick to them. Never chase losses. Don't gamble when you're depressed or upset, and create a healthy balance. Always be aware of how much time you spend gambling or thinking about gambling. And do not allow gambling to cause you to miss out on time with family and friends or time spent on other activities you enjoy. By following these guidelines, gambling can be a good time and great entertainment. If you feel at any time that your gambling is taking away from important areas of your life, is causing you stress or depression, or is leading to financial losses that are beyond your control, please reach out for help. Learn more at responsiblegambling.org.